Hi.
Catherine,
Yes,
welcome
hey.
back. Hi.
Thank you. Thank you.
Floyd, Catherine spoke in our last session.
Good afternoon, Catherine. How you doing?
Hi, how are you? I'm looking forward to what you have to say.
And
Thank you for that.
we're gonna
Well,
have
as well.
kind
Go
of
ahead.
we're gonna have a dialogue today. So it'll be a little
Oh,
bit each
okay.
one's a little bit different. Catherine did a beautiful presentation of a whole exhibition that she had, and then some other showed us some pieces too. Oh, and Luna's joining too. Great. We have a couple more people joining. Wonderful. So welcome, Luna.
Hi.
It's a beautiful name.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, well, we are all connected and we're live on Facebook and we're here in our Zoom studio. And we've got the wonderful Floyd Hall with us today. So, anything you'd like to say, Floyd, to get us started before I introduce the show and introduce you?
Just wanted to say good afternoon. I'm very excited to be here and looking forward to a great conversation. And just very thankful for everyone who's tuning in or who will watch this later. So hello to all of you now and hello to all of you in the future.
In the future. Isn't that great? Well, before we get started any further, I'd like to just share with you all a little bit about how Connect and Create began, which kind of at the start of the pandemic, I noticed something that was really lacking for me was being able to go out and run into people at social events. And I love those creative dialogues that you have kind of on the fly. And so a couple things that was missing. And then I was invited to be a guest speaker on my friend's show called The Daily Huddle, which happens every morning at 9 a.m. And I loved it. I loved being able to share, and it kind of enlivened me to be able to share about myself and my life and my work and kind of get my attention on something that I wanted to have my attention on. And I thought, well, if it was this much fun for myself, maybe it would be fun for other people to be able to share about who they are and what they offer to the world, especially as artists and entrepreneurs and creative thinkers. And that's pretty much how Connect and Create began. And so I've been running this every Tuesday since last March. And I recently was the recipient of a grant from Fulton County Council for the Arts for people who are coming up with creative ideas to do online. So, so that's a little bit how it came to be. And I'm super excited to have Floyd Hall with us here today. Floyd has many skills and many talents that he shares with the community. And I've been lucky enough to be a guest speaker twice on your podcast. So welcome, Floyd. And I'm going to share your professional accolades, but anything else you'd like to say before I get into those?
No, I'm sure a lot of it will come out in the conversation, but again, I'm just glad to be here. And I just wanted to applaud you for, creating this platform and keeping it going for so long. I think that as someone who knows what it's like to have to produce content on schedule and to have to commit to that, I think it's a tremendous effort that needs to be applauded. And sometimes people don't often understand the behind the scenes that goes into it. So just wanted to just thank you and applaud you for being so consistent with it and creating this space. So I'm ready to keep it going.
Awesome. Well, once again, thanks for being here. And thanks everyone who's in our live Zoom studio audience. And those of us that are joining us on Facebook and those that will listen to this in the future.
In the future.
In the future. That's funny. I'm going to say that.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
Now I was going to say, you always got to shout out to the people who will watch it in the future and
I'm going to.
give them some love also.
Awesome. All right. It makes me think of that 80s movie, Back to the Future, but now we live that all the time, right? We really do live that all the time, minus the Valerian. All right. So Floyd Hall is a media strategist. He's a cultural producer, and he's a writer and documentarian from Atlanta, Georgia. His professional work often relates to the intersection of art, media, and technology as platforms. As an artist, he's interested in the process of how we come to define and design ourselves. And he's passionate about how history, culture, and art blend together to construct narratives of place. He's worked across the media spectrum in a variety of roles and capacities, including strategy, research, and production. His current and past work spans several industries, including digital media, entertainment, brand management, nonprofit arts, social change, sporting goods, sports media, and luxury lifestyle. So, welcome, Floyd, and thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here.
So good to be here. Thank you again for that warm introduction.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So, I was wondering, Floyd, if you could share with us, just a little bit about some of your favorite exhibitions from the past year.
Yeah, I think we're now in this space where surprisingly, sometimes it feels that the year's almost over. It feels like we've been sort of stuck in a space, this intermediate space for so long. And you look up in this end of the year, and normally we have these moments where we sort of look back at what we enjoyed or didn't enjoy sometimes about the previous 12 months. And so I began to do some reflection on um, this past year in terms of exhibitions and art in the community. And it was weird, I almost forgot the pre-COVID era of the year. Like there was a point in time where we really were out in the world. And so wanted to just highlight a couple of exhibitions that I went to this year that I think are really interesting. So one, I wanted to highlight the Virgil Abloh exhibition at the High Museum, as well as the Romare Bearden exhibition at the High Museum. Both of these exhibitions were overlapping concurrently. I think they started in 2019 and then sort of wrapped around the beginning of this year into 2020. So I'll still count them for the purposes of this conversation. But what I think is so important about those two exhibitions separately is that I think they show us the arc of how we consider fine art or like museum worthy exhibitions. Virgil Abloh is very much a thinker and designer that's rooted in now, in a very specific way in which we consume culture. And I think his exhibition, really reflects this popular culture consumerism that we have. That exhibition highlighted his work in the music space, in the fashion space, as well as apparel like shoes and some collaborations with Nike that's separate from his fashion work. But all of that being said, I think that his exhibition to me was a great reflection of really where we are or where we were as a culture prior to COVID-19 in terms of our obsessions or our fascinations with brands. And I think that it was a great juxtaposition to have both that show up at the same time as the Romare Bearden exhibition at the High Museum, because thinking about Romare Bearden, you think about a more sort of classic framing of fine art and an artist who we think of as one of the contemporary masters, if you will, of his craft, of collage, of narrative, and telling certain stories. And so I think having these two artists and their work at the same time at the High Museum just really felt like a great juxtaposition to me, and thinking about them also as Black men, two artists, again, who have very different takes on the world. Romare Bearden really creates narrative out of a bit of a working class aesthetic, Southern, inner city, sort of like there's just a lot of like gritty, sometimes authenticity around his work, and comparing that to the Virgil Abloh brandedness, I just thought it was really great. And I wanted to highlight those two as some of my favorite shows from this past year. Oh, also, I think on the other end of that, thinking about the High Museum as an institution, going to the other end of that sort of scale, I wanted to highlight Mint's Leap Year exhibition, which I forgot this was a leap year. we get these every few years. So this was a leap year, and Mint has a leap year program. And this year in February, at the end of February, they had a big bash to celebrate their reopening. So you have this nonprofit in the arts that is really about emerging artists and supporting emerging artists. So on the other end of the, with the high, you have established artists, commercially well-known artists. At Mint, you have emerging artists who are at the beginning of their careers trying to figure it out. But I think they put together a very lovely space. It was brand new at that time, and they were really beginning to set up shop as a hub, if you will, for the arts, and are still doing some of that. But I think being in that space, it really felt great to be there and see all of the newness of it. And as a bit of full disclosure, I am on the board of Mint, so I speak from some sense of awareness of what's happening with the organization. But I did want to highlight that, and also I think that exhibition was before I joined the board. So I think I had the pleasure of visiting and sort of taking all of that in as a visitor, and not on the inside. So,
Right.
Yeah, two of my favorite exhibitions of the year.
Well, that's really great. And I know I went to see the Bearden show, and I'm struggling in my mind to recall the Virgil Abloh. Was he in the same, what part of the museum was that? You said it was at the same time. What part of the museum was that that show in?
So it was, if you went into the High Museum and then the main entrance atrium, if you will, headed towards the elevators to your right and go up, it was in that area. Whereas for Bearden, you would go through the sort of walkway
Right.
to the other, well, not the other side, but just it's hard to describe directions in a virtual space, but the Virgil Abloh show was up the elevators upstairs. The Bearden show was sort of through towards the atrium and then upstairs again.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And I was definitely at the Mint, at the Mint bash. The thing that sticks out to me was, if I'm thinking of the right event, was the live painting with what is his name? He's a graduate from SCAD, young guy, really, really great. And him and another woman, they did this live painting, and they were covered head to toe in paint. I think that was Mint's bash. Am I thinking of the right thing, or was that a different event? That might have been.
I am trying to remember. I may have not. If that happened, I wasn't there for that part of it.
Oh.
But it was the bash actually took place on Leap Day, so it happened on the 29th, which I thought was really great also. But that was just.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
That might have been their grand opening. I think they're all kind of blending. They're all way back then, before COVID, all those live shows, they're all kind of blending into the past.
For sure.
Awesome. Well, what would you say, Floyd, is your favorite, in public art moments throughout the year? If you were to, look back, what would be something that you would, want to stands out for you about your public art moments?
I think our connection to public in many ways changed a lot this year. How we behave in public, how we exist in public, what we observed in the public, but through virtual means. A lot of how we thought through the public really shifted throughout this year. So a lot of the public art, that we normally would I guess encounter felt a little bit different this year. There were a handful of exhibitions / moments that I thought were interesting, or at least deserve some consideration. So number one, given the social context of the year, I wanted to highlight the Juneteenth Takeover, which was coordinated by Powerhouse Creative, that's Ash Nash and her crew. But they, Powerhouse organized a public art experience where they created temporary murals outside of the Flatiron Building downtown in Atlanta. So in the windows and on the exteriors of that building on Juneteenth, there were, probably a dozen artists or so who were creating in that moment. And they all were, sort of working and creating art on panels outside of that building. So that was like a bit of a public art, exhibition, engagement. There was some social justice practice happening there as well. And I thought that was a moment that was really responsive. Like I think lots of times when things happen in the world, people are left wondering, well, what can we do? Or if you're artists, you're thinking, am I, how do I make work in this space, or how should my work reflect what's happening in this moment? I think that was a moment where all that kind of came together in a public art way. In a similar fashion, but more of a, if you blink, you might have missed it fashion. Hank Willis Thomas, who is a, world-renowned contemporary artist, of significance these days. He had a touring art piece, which was a huge, like 15-foot Afro pick that was touring around to different places around the country. And I think for the Atlanta stop, it was on Ponce in the parking lot of 8 Arm.
Yeah.
Right there across from the Chipotle, across from the Kroger, right there next to 8 Arm. You might have seen this huge, like 15-foot Afro pick, kind of just like in the parking lot, that really made you, stop and take note of what that was. And that piece, I think is entitled, I think I have it in my notes here, that piece from Hank is entitled, All Power to All People.
Mm-hmm.
That was the name of that piece. And so I think, again, you have an artist who's considering the context of the world. They're considering, how does my work correspond to that, and what can I do? And I think in this moment of people wanting their voices to be heard, his piece, All Power to All People, really kind of spoke to that in a way that was just very interesting. And I think, I don't know how many cities were part of that tour, but I'm glad that Atlanta was a stop for that. And then I think the other one that I think is important, at the Atlanta Beltline, or Art on the Atlanta Beltline, had to shift like many organizations, did this past year. But I did want people to take note of the exhibition that was planned by their very first curator in residence, which was Courtney Brooks. And her experience, her art offering that she had planned was Journey of a Black Girl.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a lot of public engagement, public work, just all things public, in and around the Atlanta Beltline, that got shifted significantly because of COVID-19. And so I think that the intention behind that and the programming behind that was really, really strong. And I hope that the Beltline will re-engage that work when we're able to be in public again, and bring that back to give it its proper showing. I know that so many artists had to make do with sort of the moment that we had this past year, and some things didn't quite get the attention that they deserve. So I hope that the Beltline will bring that back, because both from the engagement, the film, the actual sculpture pieces that were involved in that, I just thought it was really well thought out. And again, because of our times, many people probably just missed it and didn't get a chance to actually see it. Mm-hmm. And right now, we're at the end of the year. So if you're listening to this or watching this in 2020, not in the future, if you're watching it real time, I would also recommend going to Woodruff Park to see the current dashboard public art installation that they do. I think this is their second year doing it now, but the show is entitled Prism, and it's a series of light-based sculptural work that takes the form of traditional sculpture. There's some installation work. There's a beautiful water installation / projection that's there. But I would encourage anyone who is in the sound of my voice right now to venture out for an evening, because this is best viewed at night. So take an evening to go to Woodruff Park and look at the dashboard public art exhibition at Woodruff Park in Atlanta entitled Prism.
Excellent. Yeah, I need to get there in the evening. I saw it during the day the other day, and I was really curious about that piece that had all the canoes in it.
Yeah. Like definitely was an eye catcher. That one was an eye catcher. There was another sculpture called Atlantis Rising by Alex Suavoni that is very interesting as well. It's like a 10-foot sculpture, like head, shoulders, like Afrofuturist kind of piece that's like there as well, that it's hard to miss, that lights up and changes colors over time as you look at it. So there's a lot of cool stuff, but I really also enjoyed the video projection in the waterfalls, the waterfalls, I guess it's a waterfall, but the fountain, I would just say, in the fountain.
That with the wall.
In the wall of water fountain at Woodruff Park, there's a really great projection that takes up the majority of that fountain. That's really great. That also I think is worth your trip to go down there and visit that as well.
How long is that show up until? Do you know?
That show is up, I think, through February.
Okay.
I think it's meant to be a winter show, so I think throughout most of winter, it'll be up. But if you just look up dashboard and public art, you'll get all of the details there.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, Floyd, could you share with us a little bit about some of the other, favorite observations that you've had that arts organizations have been, specifically arts organizations have been, pivoting. It's our favorite word of the year, right?
Yeah, a lot of us had to reorient ourselves when it comes to art or being in the public. And I don't want to make light of other ways in which we all had to shift when it comes to public health or, work for those people who, had their jobs impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. But I do think that arts organizations exhibited some real resiliency, in trying to try different things to stay afloat. So a couple of observations. One, I think I wanted to highlight Plaza Theater for reconfiguring the theater concept and creating a bit of a makeshift drive-in theater. For those who know that area, they've taken the back parking lot of Plaza Theater and turned that into a drive-in theater. So, while we can't be with one another in our traditional theater experiences, they, I think, display some ingenuity and some daring to say, this isn't what it used to be, but here's a way that it can be, and trying to create some bit of normalcy even amidst really abnormal times. So I want to highlight them. I think Soul Food Cypher. I want to highlight them as well. Disclosure, I'm on the board of Soul Food Cypher as well. But I want to highlight them because the essence of a hip hop cipher, for those who are into hip hop or you've seen, it's a very specific in-person experience where you may have men and women, boys and girls, communities kind of in conversation with one another in a very intimate way. Like it's meant to be experienced in person and amongst one another, sharing ideas. So you can imagine that in the space of COVID-19, that's just not a reality. And so Soul Food Cypher pivoted to hosting online ciphers. So trying to keep the same essence of, the music, the communication of ideas and lyrics and verses, but doing that through a virtual platform like Zoom, but creating enough, doing the research to like make the timing work out so you can have the music playing with the MCs, involved, but also having that virtual cipher allowed them to expand their reach to reach international audiences. So now you have people in Canada and other countries who can be involved in the cipher. So once upon a time, it was very specific to being in person in Atlanta. And now because of COVID-19 and that pivot, the cyber has now opened up to a global audience. And so I think like being able to really make the best of a bad situation was very important. And sort of staying on that subject of music, I think music has been something that's gotten a lot of people through through this moment. And I think about all of the DJs who, you know, shifted their perspective and their offerings from, you know, the lounges and the clubs where they were usually performing to, you know, performing online. So you could log on to your favorite, you know, Zoom channel of your favorite DJ or on Instagram, and you're seeing artists, you know, and DJs who like still try to provide that same musical ambiance in as best of a way as possible. So I think like that was really good. To that extent, I think the biggest phenomena to come out of the music side of the pandemic has been Versus, which is a series of sort of not competition, not quite battle, more of a celebration of like two different artists whose styles may be a little bit similar. So it's coming out of the brains of two hip hop producers, Timbaland and Swiss Beats, who also was a great art collector, by the way, for those who know the Dean collection. But having a moment just to celebrate musical culture, and it's grown from a space of, you know, a few thousand people, or a few 100,000 people, to a moment where at any one time during their, you know, once a month or twice a month experiences, there'll be, you know, well over 1 million people logged on to Instagram at the same time watching, you know, this musical experience. And so this is an idea that was born and manifested strictly out of this moment. And you're seeing artists sort of shift and take advantage of that. So, you know, to be on Instagram with 1 million other people and like around the world just feels, you know, like you're tapping into an energy slash frequency that I don't know, just feels like it just feels good. It feels like everyone is trying to make the best out of the situation. So I think those are a couple of my like observations when it comes to how we sort of shifted and make the best out of what's happening with the pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah. I love all the different kind of angles that you're taking this, you know, from, and I know I've never thought in my life that I would have a fun time at like a Zoom dance party. But I have to say, when I look back on the year, like, wow, I've had some DJ friends put together dance parties and events, you know,
Yeah.
and you see all your friends and then they highlight someone at one point. And, you know, so like the creativity within those, you know, what we would look at as limits has been really interesting to see. And it'll be interesting to see, I think, also like as things come back to being able to socialize in person, you know, what do we hold on to that we started
Yeah.
at the pandemic? You know, maybe
Yeah.
there's an occasional, you know, global situation that wouldn't have happened anyway, right?
Sure. And also, I also want to highlight the theater companies
Mm,
who found ways to use our streaming platforms to their advantage as well and making the best out of that situation. But also authors, you know, book readings, you know, interesting readings or rereadings of text. You know, you could log on to your favorite virtual platform and see, you know, your favorite book being read or performed or some sort of commentary around it. So I think this really gave a lot of artists a chance to just think more broadly about how they could exist in the world, but also extend their existence to other people and
mm.
foster a connection that way.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, as you're talking about this, I'm recalling I was talking to this friend of mine the other day who goes to Italy every year. And she says she goes on these walks with people throughout Italy. And they just put you on Zoom and they talk a little bit about where they're going. And, you know, she had 2 trips planned to go to Italy with groups of people, you know, and there they are walking through Italy, you know.
Yeah.
So, well, listen, any other, you know, there were a couple other favorite conversations that you mentioned with fashion and art, as well as some anniversaries.
Yeah, you know, again, in even having this conversation, I think is a great example of that. I think artists have found ways to come together and get together with each other and try to bring new audiences into, the work and their, experience. So I wanted to also highlight Karen Comer Lowe, who, if you're in the Atlanta area, you may know Karen Comer Lowe as a curator, as an arts administrator. But Karen has been hosting a series of Instagram conversations with pretty prominent artists. I think it's every couple of weeks, if not every week. I think it's just been a great conversation. And she's been, she has so many great connections that she can sort of make phone calls and get people onto the line with relative ease. And so these are really informal conversations that Karen Comer Lowe is hosting. And also Alex Davis. Alex is one of the few people that I've seen who really is capturing the essence of what's happening in the fashion space. For those who are into fashion or luxury, or just like nice things, I think that Alex has done a great job of curating conversations with important people who are in the fashion space. And I think that's an area that isn't always as visible. But we all are wearing clothes. People have designed these clothes that we're wearing, and I think that to even get some perspective on how we adorn ourselves with clothes or with jewelry, or how the things that we consume in that way are produced as well. So she's had some really great fashion conversations. And I think she has a really great platform for that. So I wanted to highlight that. And to the notion of anniversaries, so much of how we mark time this year changed. For birthdays, it evolved from the Zoom birthday calls to the drive-by birthday parades. We found different ways to mark time. And I think even in the arts community in Atlanta, this would have been a big year for certain types of celebrations that we kind of missed, and hopefully we'll see those in the next year. But Mint celebrating 15 years coming up. Mocha GA, the Museum of Contemporary Art, Georgia, celebrates 20 this year. Flux Projects which is a public art organization as well, they turned 10. And so I think in considering the length of time of these organizations, one, it takes a lot to start and to maintain an organization in the arts. You're talking managing through, upswings and downswings and funding and support and trying to create a sustainable organization. I think there's a lot of elbow grease that has to go into making these organizations what they are. And so I believe this year we sort of missed out on the celebration of these organizations and what they have been and have meant to artists and culture folks in Atlanta. So I just want to highlight those organizations as well.
That's great. That's great. And what would you? And so thanks for bringing to light, to share that and to celebrate all of those organizations. And I'm really impressed, by the way, with how many different boards you're on and how really involved. We've known each other socially for a number of years and professionally, but I didn't understand. You inspire me. I'm like, God, there's boards I've thought about being on. I should really do that. So I appreciate your involvement in the city. It's really great. So what would you say? Yeah, definitely. What would you say is your favorite big picture observation throughout the last year?
Yeah, I think that this year, 2020, will be remembered for a lot of things. We'll look back 10 years from now and we'll remember just a remarkable year from a variety of perspectives. But I think what I got from it is artists being resilient, artists using their voices to reflect on and be a part of conversations in a variety of ways. I think artists, there's always sort of balance of agency versus permission that artists navigate within. Agency to create your work, but sometimes waiting on permission to be invited into a space or invited to be part of the moment. So there's always this notion of artists balancing agency versus permission. And I think that what I observed this year is artists really leaning on the agency half of that, to take their art into places and to use it to say things they felt were very important, whether that be public health, because of COVID-19, whether that be through social justice, with a lot of the conversations that we've had in the country this past year relative to, Black Lives Matter and just rethinking, race in this country. So I think artists were very vocal as far as that. I think also, it's hard to ignore artists being very civically engaged. We had a lot of artists who have been and, will probably still remain involved in a lot of the policy conversations and the civic conversations. So I think this year, this like confluence of moments, public health, social justice, civics, just a lot of these things kind of came together to create a moment where I think artists felt extremely empowered to use their voices to advocate for what they believed in. And I think that, again, we'll look back on this year and we'll probably remember a lot of like the more newsy kind of things about the year. But I think what I don't want to get lost in this year is just that resiliency and that attention to, the moment and being willing to pivot and make risky choices and hard choices and just being committed to still pushing through and creating work and just being intentional and resilient. I think like those are my two like words I think about when I think about arts in 2020 and looking forward to what happens next year and years going forward. But I don't want that to get overlooked as we sort of mark what happened in the history books for 2020.
Thank you. As we're having this conversation, I'm realizing how perfect it is that we have your conversation at the end of the year. It's like almost this wrap up of everything that's happened. And, we've had this whole swirl of the year. It's kind of hard to think like, oh, we're coming to the end of the year and something new is happening. Like, what do we have to celebrate? What's something that we're going to remember historically from this year? And so, I just realized how perfect it is that you're our last conversation of this year, our final conversation of this year. So with that being said, actually, we have we have another conversation next week. I'm all screwed up with my dates as I say that. Is that next year?
Oh, it's fine. It's fine. I mean, I'm just thankful to have this.
One more conversation this year, but you're almost at the end.
Yes, this is the penultimate conversation, but I feel like it's hard to, at least for me, I'm always like a person who likes to think about like context. How do we wrap things up in context? So I think that this year has been a year of context, and I think because of so many of the, again, more news-driven aspects of the year, some things may get lost in that, and I just don't want that to kind of overshadow all of the really great work and the great intention that lots of people in the arts had over this past year.
Yeah, I really get in this conversation too, Floyd, what a champion of like the grassroots organizations and the arts organizations, and like there's this conversation of like you're such an advocate for people, right? For the human beings, for the artists, for the creatives, even the movie theaters, and I just love that you've brought all of this to light. So you do so much for so many other people, so many organizations. Would you like to share a little bit about some of the things that you have going on personally, some of your own personal projects? I know you shared a little with me the other day, but please share with our audience.
Yeah, thank you for that. Again, I'm so glad that we could make this moment happen, Karina, and I'm excited because you and I recorded a conversation for a podcast that I'm producing called Arts and Ideas. Episodes of that will be forthcoming at the end of this year and into next year, and hopefully beyond that. But that's a conversation that really is about, what's in the title, Arts and Ideas, and talking with artists and creatives around what drives their intention, the big ideas that are in their sort of environment, their ecosystem. I love having those kind of conversations. So be on the lookout for Arts and Ideas. I mentioned, proudly to be on the board of Mint and Soul Food Cypher. So I'm glad that those organizations are continuing to push through this year and into the next. But I'm really proud of a local journalism nonprofit that I had the good fortune to partner with some really great and amazing folks on as co-founders, called Canopy Atlanta. Canopy Atlanta is a Atlanta-based journalism platform where we tell, great Atlanta stories in partnership with communities, and also with the intention of trying to increase the number of local journalists in Atlanta. So much of the Atlanta story gets told by other people coming into the city from other places, other publications, but we really want to try to support storytellers and journalists in Atlanta. And so Canopy Atlanta, if you think about Canopy, like Canopy is like coverage, so news, stories, coverage. Canopy is committed to telling those stories and really highlighting interesting and amazing stories throughout the metropolitan Atlanta area. So that's the city of Atlanta, of course, but sort of Fulton County, which was where most of Atlanta is based, Fulton County and the neighboring counties around Fulton County. That's where we're sort of considering Metro Atlanta. And so our first issue published earlier this fall about the West End, and we'll be making some announcements very shortly around the next issue and what neighborhood that'll be covering. But the premise of the publication is that for every issue, it takes a deep dive into one Atlanta neighborhood. So you get a really great sort of intricate, insight into just a great area, a great neighborhood, a great community, and the people and the stories that make up that place, and why that place is important to Atlanta. So we want to give a plug for Canopy Atlanta, and just to ask for people to be on the lookout and to support. So that's what's happening in my world. Oh, and one more thing, I do lots of podcasting, so I'm also hosting a podcast design workshop, which is really meant for all early stage podcasters who are looking to learn how to create and develop their own podcast. It's called Design Your Dialogue. And this is meant to really just help you. This is a free workshop that I'm doing that really just helps early stage podcasters and podcast producers with elements of marketing, editing, sponsorship, staying motivated to produce your work, just trying to cover all of those areas of support that I've experienced as areas of need for podcasters, as podcasting, the industry continues to sort of skyrocket and blow up. So that's what I got going on. Thank you for the platform to get all that out. And I'm just glad that we could have this moment again. Yeah.
That's really great. Well, Floyd, I can't thank you enough for, all that you've shared. And I'm really present to what an advocate you are, for the arts in Atlanta and at large. And I'd like to know, your audience here in our Zoom room spans throughout the Metro Atlanta. And we even have a guest from Poland. So welcome.
Hello, Poland.
So even in this, middle of the day, middle of the week conversation, we're reaching people all the way across the waters. Anything you'd like to say, Annalise? Thanks for coming.
Hey, Floyd, thanks. I'm actually an American living in Poland, and I'm very interested in what you were saying, particularly about the idea of technology. So just to say that the experience for me during this pandemic, I think, has been quite different, living on foreign soil than it has been on my native soil, for good and bad reasons. I think I've sort of escaped a lot of the political fray, thank God. Just but I kind of avoided Zoom for the, we were under lockdown 2 or 3 weeks back in March, and I thought, oh God, I don't want to deal with that. And then when I realized that this thing was going to go longer, than the 2 or 3 expected months and possibly a year to 2 years, I said, I better get active on Zoom really fast. And what I'd like to speak to is just how grateful I am that we do have this technology, and grateful to artists who are creating because as an inspiration for people like me, not on American soil, we take a lot for granted. And, like Karina mentioned, I'm now in probably 8 to 10 different activities facilitated from Atlanta, LA, London, etc., just by Zoom. So I'd like to acknowledge you for creating and not giving up, because you're making life a hell of a lot easier for me, for people like me, because Polish is the native language here. And so really getting an the Atlantic, right? Although that's good too, but the Atlanta vibe, the LA vibe, because the other thing is too, I think it's important, just quickly, a lot of what's happening in Poland has to deal with women's rights. And when you mentioned something about Black Lives Matter, that doesn't really exist in this country. I don't mean Black lives. I mean the conversation about it, because it's such a different system and a different belief. So, I'd be very interested in staying connected with you, because I'd love to see what you're doing, what you're up to. And also, you're a bridge to Karina anyway. So there you go. So I really appreciate it. And just quickly, just so I can shout out to a couple of things, the Skirball Museum in Los Angeles, the Carnegie Hall, I've seen their performances, the Skirball. Of course, I've been connected with Karina. This is probably the 4th or 5th talk I've touched base with, albeit late. Sorry, Karina. I highly recommend getting hooked up with LA folks, because they seem to be doing quite a bit as well. So I really appreciate it, Floyd. Thank you.
Thank you as well. And thanks for checking in all the way from Poland. It was really great to hear from you. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, and come visit Krakow. They have some stuff, when it's under normal conditions. There's some stuff that's happening, and we could certainly use some variety over here. They do have some drumming classes and some certain things going on, but everything's pretty much stopped. So would love to stay connected, Floyd. Thank you.
Thank you. Same here.
Feel free, if you want to use the chat to create a connection, you're welcome to do that as well. If you want to trade information. And
yeah, I'll put my
Karina, is it just under participants?
Let's see.
I'm on my phone. Karina, I'm on my phone, so that may not be possible.
Oh.
Can I just, here's what I'll do, Floyd. I will send my email and my full Facebook name. Karina knows it, and you can just add me.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Okay.
If you want to put your info in there for anyone else, you're welcome to, Floyd. I meant to say that earlier. Oh, thanks, Annalise, for joining and making our group here international today.
I'm serious. I'm serious. It's like, it's, not to, I love living in Poland. I love living abroad. I mean, it's an amazing place. And, I do miss occasionally the US connection. Don't get me wrong. There is something about how Americans approach the arts, the creativity. I think Floyd spoke to it, the creativity, the ingenuity, that's just this side of the planet, with all due respect, they're still pretty new at it. That entrepreneurial spirit, that idea of creating is still relatively new over here. And I do miss that. So thank you for keeping me abreast, Floyd. Really, very, very interested.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Annalise. Anyone else here have any questions or comments you'd like to share with Floyd before we wrap up today? Thanks for joining, Ronald. And yeah, Catherine.
One, I wanted to thank you for all of your comments, but I was pleased that you mentioned MoCA's 20 years. Because it opened right about 9/11, and that's, it's had its problems to confront and overcome with regard to fundraising and that sort of thing. And Annette Cohn-Skelton, of course, deserves a ton of credit for that. But also, two of their last shows, and I'm kind of blanking the artist's name. One's last name may have been Downs. He was a very good artist.
William
And
Downs.
huh?
William Downs.
You got it. Okay. And just an extraordinary exhibition. It was really beautiful. And their current exhibition, I'm blanking her name too, but it's also a very fine exhibition.
Need to get to see that one. And yeah, there was something about visiting, and thank you, Catherine, for that shout out. You know, there was something about visiting William's exhibition. You know, he's such a social human being, you know, and there was something about being there with all those figures and his cactus, you know, his cactus Joffrey was pictured in there as well, you know, and, you know, there was something about being in that space. And I kept imagining what it would be like with a crowd of people, you know, like wall to wall people. And there's something about that irony of being surrounded, you know, like I heard a write-up where someone referred to them as cave paintings, right? And so something about this time that we're in right now where we're not physically gathering in groups, but to have these masses of people inside of that. And if anyone that's listening, you know, if you go to the website for Mocha GA or for the Instagram or Facebook page of William Downs, you'll see his, you know, even on my Instagram, there's some pictures of that. It was just
Rena, could you send it in a private message to me?
Yeah, definitely.
Please, definitely. That'd be great.
Yeah. So yeah, so thanks, Catherine.
Socially distanced, both exhibitions, of course, with appointments and masks and all of that.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be interesting when we get back to a point where we interact, you know.
It will be.
Distantly. So we are over a little bit of time, but the conversation is so rich. Anything for you, Ronald or Luna, before we wrap up?
Well, Floyd, this is Luna. I just wanted to thank you for making the podcast about arts in Atlanta. I am in the Marietta area, and I alternate between feeling overwhelmed by the amount of arts in Atlanta and not sure what to go to. So I'm definitely going to listen to that.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah. You know, and I think that the Atlanta, the metro area can sometimes, like, you can sort of have that sort of ebb and flow of I think if you're not living in Atlanta, if you're living somewhere in the suburbs or sort of the OTP area or close to that, there's always sort of this notion of how do you, I think, connect with what's happening in, you know, like in the city center, if you will. But then also sometimes it can be overwhelming if you sort of not around it all of the time. So I think there's always like that sort of balance of trying to find the right pace of consuming in a way sort of what's happening in the Atlanta area for sure.
Yeah. Ronald, did you have a comment?
I kind of jump in really late. But I just turned on my computer here and looking at Floyd Hall bios and some information. Definitely gonna want to get to know this brother, you know, and get to, actually, let me just turn on my screen so you could see me too.
Ronald's a really great artist. He had a show at the E Complex this year.
Okay.
His paintings, yeah. And I don't know, Ronald, if that group that you were painting, that group that you were showing with, if you guys have any other things happening in the future.
We're working on some work for another location. At this point, actually the art promoter, Fritz Joseph, was a great brother too. You know, somebody will, you know, I guess I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Hall. But you know, altogether, it's been a great year as far as the arts. I was listening to a podcast from Georgetown University saying that COVID really haven't affected the arts this year. A lot of people are still really producing a lot of work, and collectors are still interested in buying and stuff like that. So but I kind of really get in the tail end of the conversation, but yeah, I'm definitely want to stay tuned for the next podcast and actually try to really register for you. You're gonna create a podcast for uh, like initial podcast, how to create podcasts. Floyd, I would like to really attend to that one day
Yes,
and get to know it.
I will put a a link in the chat area. But yeah, so I'm doing a series of podcast workshop called Design Your Dialogue, and if you register, even for the ones that have already passed, you can you can watch some of the older iterations of that. So I'm gonna make a link to that, and it's on my website.
You want to put your website in there too?
Yeah. Um, so yeah, like I think it's on like the first page of my website there. But Design Your Dialogue.
Okay.
Um, you can rewatch some of the old versions and catch the newer versions when they happen. So thank you for that, and I encourage please share the word to any other folks who are interested in podcasting. I've produced probably 800 podcast episodes at this point, so just wanting to break down a lot of the trial and error of what I've learned and having colleagues and friends of mine share their expertise as well. So uh, just thanks for that and look forward to upcoming workshops.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for being here, and thank you, Floyd, for sharing such a great commentary on the whole year. It really kind of wrapped up the year and in a beautiful way. And thank you, everyone.
Karina, I've decided your podcasts make me want to go to Atlanta. I've never been to Atlanta, just so you know. Sorry, I totally interrupted, but I'm like, I already have an art program. I can tell already.
There's a lot going on here. And
I am clear about that.
Yeah, and what you guys may or may not know about me, on any given Thursday, Friday, or Saturday night, I would try to go to as many art openings as possible and run into as many people. And Catherine, you were definitely one of those people I always enjoyed, speaking with in person. So yeah, Annalise, we have a really lively art community here in Atlanta, very diverse community. Lots of different types of artwork and organizations, and really part of what had me want to create. And then I do have people from the West Coast occasionally on this show, and I've had people from the middle of the country as well, a number of California people. I didn't think if I had anyone from another country. I don't think I've gone international yet. I need to. But so we do have one more conversation, and Catherine, I believe it's actually your friend that will be speaking next week, Lois Shkalar. Is that your friend? Yeah. Yeah. You're on mute. You're on mute, Catherine. Oh, looks like you're trying to second. You're still on mute, Catherine.
Got it.
There we go.
Okay.
Friend, right?
Yeah, she had gone to the Atlanta College of Art when I did, but very, very briefly.
Right.
I remember her, but I don't remember being in classes with her. It's very strange.
Yeah. Well,
In any event, she's in Canada now.
Uh-huh. Oh, good. We're going international this week.
She looked me up online and sent me an email she had bought, and I didn't remember this either. I must have been busy my senior year, but she bought a piece of my work, and it was in her home and nicely framed and looked good. And I thought, holy cow, that work is 50 years old. But anyway, it was fun to have that kind of reconnection with her.
Well, she was a go-getter. She communicated to me, and we booked her, and so she's going to be speaking next week. Yeah, so you can come back and look at her work. And we have some other really great. We have a musician that I met at the Hambidge Center. He's in Alabama. He'll be speaking next. He'll be the first speaker of next year. And we have Jamie Bourgeois, who's the gallery assistant at the gallery that I show at, Spalding Nicks. She does these beautiful pollinator scarves. So we've got a couple other people. Lisa Tuttle is going to be speaking. So we have a great schedule, and I'm always looking for new speakers. So if you have something you'd like to share about the arts, or your own personal story as an artist, or creativity and entrepreneurialism,
may I,
Yeah.
you said you wanted to do something international.
You want to
no, but what about a Polish guide who's one of the top in the city of Krakow about a Polish painter?
Yeah, that would be great.
It would be like I can never say this, Pekinski, very famous, P-E-K, whatever, Pekinski or Wyspiański. I can hook you up with actually a Polish native speaker.
That'll be fun.
Okay, let's talk. I'm sorry to keep interrupting, but these ideas are coming.
They're coming, I can tell.
All right, so you'd contact me. Yeah, because I think that Floyd ought to meet Pavel. Pavel needs to hook up with Floyd. That's a pairing. Yeah, okay.
All right, great. See if we have international collaborations getting ready to be birthed. And that's why this show is called Create and Connect, or Connect and Create. There we go, one or the other, because it's all about creating. It's all about connecting, and I thank you all for joining on this virtual platform. Floyd, I'd like to give you the last word before we wrap up today.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you for everyone who tuned in today. And I would just like to say thank you for giving of your space and your time and your energy to this moment. And I just wish all of you the very best in the new year as we march forward to that. So thank you again, Karina, and we'll see each other on the stream somewhere, somehow, some way. So take care.
Catch another sunrise. Floyd was a
that too.
sunrise hike. All right. Well, we'll see you all next week, and that'll be our last conversation of the year. Although this conversation really did a beautiful job of really wrapping up the year and bringing it to light. So thank you all for joining. Those of you that joined us on Facebook, and those of you that will be joining us in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.